Okay, so today we'll go through the extended data type. So we generally tell it is an EDT. Okay, so EDT means extended data type. Okay, so it's like, what is EDT? It's like a primitive data type, a container that has supplementary name. So, and we use EDTs is everywhere. So everywhere, wherever you are using, creating EDT in table forms classes, we use a EDT. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So let's just try to understand this. So first, let's say whenever we are doing any of our creation, start from our basic data structure, which is our table where we store the data. So whenever I was creating the data, so I need some columns, which is my fields in table. Base enums was one type of field where we can store the constant values, but the fields where we do not need to have store constant values, where we can just simply go and type anything. Yesterday we were seeing the example of a table where we have date, amount, and a transaction type, or which were also fixed values, credit card, cash. But the amount, date field, those were not of any fixed values. It can contain any type of values. So those fields are kind of a data type, which is where we can use any kind of EDT. And why it is called extended data type? Because extension or extendability is the main property of it, and the reusability of that EDT. So what do I mean by that? Let's say, take an example. If we have under the extended data type, under we have a model 1, and under the model 1, uh, if you are a senior developer, you are creating one parent table for storing the data, which is a very, let's say, large scale data it is storing, and it's an important table. So you are a senior, as a senior developer, you are creating that table. Okay, and you are you are not giving that access to the junior employee, so you are creating that table. So in that table, let's say you have 30 different fields, and you go and create 30 columns, and under those 30 columns you create 10 or 15 different extended data type, and those EDT you are using in your model. So let's say you have created a let's say type field, which is an enum. Let's say you have a date field, which is an date type EDT, and you name it as maybe, let's say, consider is that a table for customers, so cust date. Okay, so this is the name of your EDT, which is a cust date. Then you have something called registration date, registration number, and this is a number type of EDT, which is digit, and which is a digit, and you have this as cust reg. Again, this is the name of your EDT. Okay, again you have something called as maybe type of uh, real, which is maybe customer license code, which is again a string field, and you use a customer license code. Again, this is a name of your EDT, and the types are this. So this is a string field, this is a digit field, this is a date type field, and this is an enum, which we discussed yesterday. Okay, these are maybe the columns of your table. So now what the first step? You go create these three EDT. Once is customer date, customer registration number, and customer license code, and those EDT you assigned to the fields of your the columns of your table. So you create a field called date. The type would be, or the it should extend cast date. Registration number, it should extend cast reg number, which is the type you created. Customer license code, you create cust license code, again which you created. So now this is fine. So you go ahead and create so many EDTs. But if then again someone else is creating and some different table based on the customer data, based on the customer master, he doesn't need to create EDT for each of his different field. He can use the same EDTs under the same model. He can simply go and extend those EDTs. He doesn't need to create that, and we do this extension on a day-to-day basis. Like, because by default whenever you go to the system and you see, if you see, you will see thousands of EDT created by the system, like in by Microsoft, because in different models. So what you need to do, you need to simply go create a table field, give the field name, maybe this is the name of the fields, these are the name of the fields. Okay, so I'll just write it down. So the sequence is this is field name, type, the EDT name. Okay. So this is my type. So this first is my field name, this is type, and this is the EDT name. So this field name is actually being will be used for the table. Right now, if you go and create a table with a different maybe customer transaction where you can again want to reuse the same values, you just simply create a field and use the EDT as cast date, cast registration number, so that there are no duplicacy, and the extensibility or extendability of that object is everywhere into the same model. So that is very important. Again, as I was saying, by default system creates have created already created so many different EDTs, so we can use those EDTs into our system. Take an example. If you go into system and if you try to find a date, you will find something for from the system as trans date, which is a transaction date field. So if you created a field called date and if you do not want to create an enum, you can simply refer to that field as extends trans date. So it's like date, the column which you created, it's an extension of trans date. So whatever property trans date has, it will extend to this field. Similarly, if you have a string for license code, so we have fields like string fields called maybe license number, which is a string field. If you do not want to create this cast license code, you can just simply go and extend this field to cast license number. So it will inherit all the properties whatever there for the license number. And remember one thing, so it actually inherits all the property from the parent data type, which is my trans data license number. So under license number, if you have 60 characters or maybe 30 characters, so this field will only allow 30 characters. Similarly, for registration number, if you have some field called registration number and if you extend that, it will inherit all the properties like that. So this is very important to know, because and this is very also very important because as I said, if as a senior developer you are creating a table, if you are having all these different EDTs created, and you can set the properties accordingly. So under registration number, license code, you can mention how many characters is allowed. If those characters are not allowed, then or more than those characters, it will not be able to save the data. So that is why whenever someone else or a junior developer is creating, he will simply create a table. He will also have those fields, but he will extend this EDT which you have created, and it will inherit those properties in that table also, so that there is a consistency maintained across the data. So this is actually being used everywhere. There is an let's say you are storing something called as amount of transaction or something like the amount field. So simply by default system has a field called amount. Okay, so this amount field, this is a uh, real field. Real means it's like decimal. It allows like number with decimal. So it's like how we are storing in money, right? Maybe 30.75, 51.63. It's like a real field with the decimals, this amount field. This is a EDT created by the system. Okay. I go and I extend my amount field, this field to all my table structure, or in one all my table fields. So it will inherit all the properties of this EDT. Let's assume you want to this amount field, like for the sake of conversation, let's assume this amount field allows only 2 digit decimal digits. Okay. Now whenever you're storing your transaction amount, it will by default truncate the values, whatever digit you have after the decimal, it will truncate the values and it will store into that field as a 2 digit decimal field. But let's assume your customer or whoever has, they have transactions maybe into 3 4 5 digits. Okay. And they do not want to truncate that, because at the time of calculation, they want to maintain those digits in their system. Okay. That can happen, maybe some customer, they would want that. So what happens, if you use the amount EDT, it will not serve your purpose. So you have to create a new EDT. Let's say I create a new field here, maybe just maybe amount. It's a real field, and I create first amount, and I give the type as maybe 4 decimal places, 4 decimal. So now this cost amount, once you create this, and you know that this amount field or whatever field by default system provides, it will not serve your purpose. So I have to use my cost amount across all my development cases, because this amount field is the only field which is be allowed in 4 decimal places. So now I create this and I go and use it to across all my different development spaces. So that whenever data is stored in the database, it will store based on the characteristics of this cost amount EDT which you have created. Okay, so this is the concept. So how we are actually extending the data type and using and reusing it, most importantly reusing it everywhere across our development and the workspaces. Okay. So now whenever we think like EDT, so most important part is the extendability. It's called extended data type. So extendability is the most important part. Okay. Okay, so yeah, we'll go through all these topics, objective and then objective. Yeah, so it's like a scenario, like how it's like a basic scenario, right? How we so we determine our data type first. So determine our primitive data type. So primitive data type means the types. If it is in date field, if it is in real field, if this is an string field, or how many character string field. A string means text field, it's like how you type it, right? Text field. All those data type first I understood, because let's assume I ask you to create a table based on the different fields, and if you have so many different columns, first you need to identify the columns refer to what data type. If it is a constant field, then you will be using an enum. If it is a date field, then you will be using an EDT of date type. If it is a real field, then you will be using an EDT of real type. So this is the first thing we need to identify. Then we create the extended data type. If we have a field, then maybe sometimes see there's a concept here. Sometimes what happens, so majorly what we do, as I said, so as a for all the main important tables or major important transaction table or master data table, we create the data type for those tables always, and we name those based on our best practices. After that creation of that EDTs, we use it across our development model, And then if we are creating some small table, a small data table which is storing very few information, maybe 4 or 5 different columns are there, and all those fields are somehow related to my master data or the transaction field. So in that cases I can go ahead, I can create my table fields. I may not create again EDT for all those fields. I can simply reuse the EDT which I have created earlier. So that is the idea of creating the EDT. So I create my EDT based on the properties, based on the like the requirement what we have, and that I can reuse it into all of my different tables. So again, after I create my
Maitrak,
extended,
sorry to
I
interrupt you. Can
my
you just repeat this again?
yes. So
Thank you.
as I was, yes, I repeat, as I was saying. So first is to define my data type. I'll show you in the next slide what are the data types available. Maybe date, maybe real field, maybe your text field, maybe your other different type of boolean. All these different type I need to identify. Then I need to create my EDT. And so creating EDT, again, these are different objects, right? It is a new object in the system. So let's assume like if you are 4 or 5 developers working in one project, and everyone is having their own database or own table, and everyone is having a huge set of fields in their system, and all of those are master tables. In those cases, if you have a master table, that means you have a defined set of field, right? So under customer table, the example which I was showing, in actual system, if you go to the master table, you will see more than 100 columns. Okay, so they have so many different fields. But in actual cases, we create tables of maybe 30 or 40 different columns. So in those 30 or 40 columns, I can go and I can create my own data types for my master data. Right, this is the first step. So each column, like the example what we were seeing, each column I have my each of EDT. These are my EDT which I created: customer date, registration number, license code, amount, all these things, right? Now if I go to and create my other tables, which are my maybe transaction table or small master data table, which is an extension of the parent table or child table, all those things, then I do not need to again create a data type. I can simply reuse, not create, simply reuse the data type which I've created earlier. So that is the idea behind the extended data type. Okay, so this is the second step. And then we create the label values. Again, that is important because we need to give proper names to the label. Again, as I said yesterday, for label files, this is very important for the our best practices, and also whenever we are creating anything, giving meaningful name, because the development work which you are doing is not only your property, is a property of the project, right? So and this project belongs to everyone, so you are not the only one who is actually working into that project. So for that reason, it is always better to use your label files proper, with proper names and proper meaningful names, right? And then we set the properties and do a build. So this is the structure of how we are creating the data types, right? So now if I go to the, yeah, these are the type which I was showing you, right? So let's take an example of all of this. So I just simply write it down. Maybe you can take a screenshot. So enums we have already seen, like how we are like having storing data for the constant values. Booleans, you know, which is a true false value, right? This is a Boolean value. Dates we have discussed, right? It contains a day, month, and year. All these values. We have also fields of date time also. So it's like a UTC date time field, what we call. So these are the type actually. Once you start creating, you will see that these are the types. So it's like a year, month, day, all these fields. Again, we have the real values, which are my amount field, where we can store the decimals also. Okay. Integer value, which we discussed, maybe some registration number or all those things. So here we need only integer values, and string values, which are my character values. say these are the type. If you know SQL or anything, you will you know there is this like type is called string, real, integer, all this type. But the data type, the beauty of the data type is this is actually being used everywhere. I can create my data type based on the requirement what I have. So as I was explaining, for this here we have this fields created. Now I go and it's this customer registration number. I create my own data type and I can set the properties accordingly. So under registration number, maybe this is a digit field, right? And I allow only digit, 10 digit integer. So this registration number, whenever will be stored, it will be stored as a 10-digit integer. Correct? Similarly for license code, the string, maybe I consider this license code as 15 characters. So it will only allow 15 characters. And this one I can use, or rather we all can use across our projects. Okay, so this is the idea or the extension character of the data types which I am using. The amount field, again, as I was explaining, this 2 decimal and the 4 decimal, right? Similarly license, so all these things. So if I go to my enums GUID, this is a unique identifier of the global unique identifier that I'll explain later. But like this is like a 36-digit character, which is like a identifier field. So I'll show that later. But you just need to understand these are the major types on a day-to-day basis we use. Honestly, for the from the working point of view, the any type GUID, UTC, time of day, these 2 3 types we don't use much, because most of the fields which we use are our enum field, date field, integer, real, and UTC date type. These fields are very important because if you remember one thing, if you see the slide here, the first one is determine the data type. So whenever you are determining the type, you need to correctly identify the type. So someone so if I give you a requirement that okay, here whenever there is a transaction happening, I need to have a timestamp behind it. So timestamp, so what do I mean by timestamp? Timestamp means this date time. So every transaction has a, like, whenever you go and do a transaction in any of the e-commerce website, right, Amazon, Flipkart, so at the back end they have a timestamp of that date, right? So that means it has date and time, each second, uh, like year, month, day, and hour, minute, second, all this is being stored. If you do not know what do we mean by timestamp, let's maybe you like save the data and give the field type as time of day. Correct? And now whenever users are creating the data, so the data is being stored as a time of day. It doesn't contain the data like year, month, and day. So that's a wrong way of storing the data. And now if I give you, if I want to set a get a report out of the all the transaction based on my date time, I will not be able to do that, because the first place the data is itself being stored in the wrong way, because it should be date time field, not a time of day. So these are like very small like understanding of the data type. This is very important, and I like these are very pretty straightforward. If you like understand this string field, real, integer, enum, date, these are very straightforward. Like if I want to have a text field, I will always go and create a string type, right? And if I want to have a number which where we have to store the decimal places, I go and create a real one. Okay, these are like pretty straightforward. Similarly for integers and enum and the date field, boolean also. And as I said, GUID is something, it's like a unique field which is maybe a 36-digit character field. Like these are like if you have a global identifier or something which is very like unique field. So that is when we are using GUID. Again, these are not being used on a day-to-day basis. These are the types which we are using on a day-to-day basis. Okay. Now moving on to the next part. Yeah, so benefit, I was using code is easier to read because we can give the meaningful names. So this all these names, I'll explain this to you later. All these names, so the date, registration number, customer license. See, these are very like meaningful name you can give always. You don't need to give like for the date is not like a trans date. So I only use trans date in all my table field. Now whenever I go and try to uh, write my code in all the table, you will only see translate translate translate, so it's not easier to understand. So if I know which field in which table I am using, I can go and simply use the field name like that. And once I select the field name, I can in the property I can extend it to my cast date. Okay, so that is why the use of reusability and like easier of like learning the code becomes important. Okay, so properties inherited as a, this is the most important thing. The properties inherited as is explaining. So one EDT, that property can be inherited to all other EDTs. Reduce work, definitely I was explaining, whichever whenever I am using this EDT, and that few master EDTs, what I call as master EDTs, can be reused everywhere, and which reduces your work. And consistency, again, which is the same fact. Once it is reducing your work, it is providing consistency that all my development work for one module, maybe for customer module, I am creating my master data, I'm creating my transaction, I am having my reports, I am having my inquiries, all those things having a consistent data structure. Okay, so this is very important to know. Yeah, best practices, again, first is creation of EDTs whenever possible, which is we discussed. For all the master data, definitely we need to have that, and that is a very primitive thing. Auto say for one entity, create one for each entity, which I was explaining. So this is also important. Create subtypes when the, yeah. So we have creation of subtypes. Let's say I have a one parent EDT and I want to extend that. So if there is a need of creating the subtype, then only you go ahead and create that subtype. Yeah, yeah, again, one more thing, yeah, system data type, we have few system data types, reg id, table id, all these things, right? So because I told you by default system gives you this kind of things, or system data type, so it is not recommended to use these fields. Okay, okay, one more thing, yeah. So system by default gives you, as I was explaining, this data type. So you, if I show you, you will able to find as translate, amount, or there is a field called also name, where we can store the storing of names with 60 characters. So these are by default provided by system. Okay, I can use this field, I can extend this field, it's not a problem for me to use that, provided whatever model I'm creating into this, those are into the same model. Like we all know that right now, the concept of model, right? So this, it we should be having this concept of EDT, that I can go ahead, if I created it, I can extend it to my translate. So either it can be a casted, or later if you do not want to create it, I can simply put as a translate. But the primitive data type, what we are seeing, these are like date, we have string, we have real, we have boolean. So the base practice is I do not go and extend these primitive data types, which is actually written here. So do not directly use the system data type, right? This is what is being shown. So once I created column called date and I know the property, I can use any of this. Maybe I can create a new one casted and I can select a one which is a trans date. But I cannot simply go and just use it as a date. So that is not the best practice or the recommended practice. Okay. Similarly, for my registration number or my customer amount, I can simply use the customer amount or the amount if we have the same property. If let's say we do not need 4 decimal, I just simply need 2 decimal. So I can simply use create a new one, which is my custom amount, or I can use the amount, but I cannot go and extend it to real. Okay, or I cannot simply use this field. So that is not recommended. If you understand, this data type is fine. By default, system provides data types of this. but I should not use this as my extension of my table field. Okay, so this is the basic idea which you need to understand. Okay, so these are few of the best practices that you should always remember. Again, the properties, so naming standard is very important. Labels, help text should be there, and also the enum type for if you're creating an enum, it should be an enum type, and display length and style should auto whenever it's processed. So this display length I'll show it in the screen, but these are very like self-explanatory, which I discussed now only. Naming standard should be a consistent naming standard, like once ever whenever I'm creating this EDT, like this cast date, these are very generic name, right? And I should not give the names like this. It should always have a best practice, whatever the organization you are working, the following. What do I mean by that? Let's say you are for working for like the fleet management or vehicle management system, and your development workspace starts with something for maybe vehicle. So I give everything should start with my VH, right? So this is VH underscore. So this can be, or maybe if you are working for a project for maybe Vodafone, right? So everything it starts with VOD underscore, right? Or then you give cust name. So this like naming structure, everything, it comes from the project team actually, because every project has different naming structure. But this is actually maintaining all my uh, objects into the same model and maintaining the consistency. This is nothing, because whenever Microsoft comes and runs a best practice check, they checks all these things, because see this custody date, registration number, cost registration number, license code, amount, these are all very generic name. This is not being if I see this, I will not understand this is used for which project, but if I see this, I will understand, okay, this is something for either for one of the customer or one of the project or one of the model. This is very self-explanatory. And maybe then again you can give a suffix for maybe your company name or something, right? If you give your company name, maybe it's something like that, right? So this is best practice is very important, because see these are the things that you will be start doing on a day-to-day basis. Like any development work you do, the first step is creation and understanding what are the data types is needed and what are my data types which I need to use. So this is very important to understand. Okay, labels, as I said, labels is for our user interface, and help text is something which actually helps you to understand what is the purpose behind that label. And display and style I'll show you, and the enum types which I discussed. So whenever you am creating something, so enums should always be into the system, right? Okay. So yeah, this is a small example. So you see, this is like if you see this example, so this is the kind of a table which I am creating for a vehicle. So whenever I'm selecting a vehicle or car, all these things I need to enter all these fields. So this is again goes back to all these things. So I create year of vehicle inspection, all these things, right? These are my field description, what we call as the help text or the labels, which is my or rather help text, not label. These are my which allows me to understand what is the purpose of that column. This is the name of the all the EDTs which I create, and these are the type. Simply, as I was saying, this is a service type. Okay, so once I say this is a service type, so instantly it should click you that okay, this is a type. I should go and create an enum field, not any text field, because the type should be constant in the system, right? So you should understand it. Similarly, I gave is like this description. So okay, so whenever we are developing this thing, this part will be coming from the functional consultant, what we call as like the business analyst in some projects. They will provide you the list of fields, and when they say list of fields, they will provide you this description, because they will not understand what is my type, if I want to use a date field, a real field, or enum field. They will not understand that. They will understand what do I need and what is my need. My need is I need to store this. These are my data, like fuel type. I need to have an inspection date. I need to have a service start date, end date. So whenever I say a type, you again go and create an enum, not a string field. If I say the fuel level, so fuel level means there is a level of like a decimal number. Then I create a real field. Similarly, if you go and have this weight field, mileage, vehicle ID, all these are integer field because mileage, vehicle capacity, all these are constant integer field. Similarly, make, model, note, all these things are string field or a text field. Correct. So this is kind of a real life example which I have shown you. So maybe how many fields are there? 3, 6, yeah, 9, and here you will have 10. So 20 different fields are there in the table. Correct. So this is an example or a real example which you have to create. So in most of the development which we do on a project type. So in projects, see, whenever we are doing our development hands-on, it's not necessary to like create 20 fields and like just start doing, because it doesn't make any sense if you know the concept, right? But if you have to store real data, this is an example of a real data structure where you have 20 or 30 different fields, and I have all this type. So whenever I have given this the field description, I can go and create all my table fields and create my EDTs, and these will be my types. Okay, so this is the idea. So now we'll just quickly go to the system and just see what how the type and everything in the EDT. But before that, any questions?
Yeah, hi, Maitra. I have a few questions.
Yes, yes, please go
So
ahead.
firstly, the properties can be shared to another data types. So will that can be happen for even the custom fields that we will be creating in the system, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. What happens
Cus-
if I delete
Custom
the
field, what
parent?
by
Yeah, sorry.
custom field, what do you mean by custom field? Like the field you create on your own, right?
Yes, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yes, yes, that can be extended. Correct.
So will there be an issue if if I created one field as A and then I created one field as B, but I'm inheriting the properties of A, but somewhere I understood that field A is not required. I'll go and delete it off. Will there be an issue for the field B?
Yeah, yeah. Then there will be issue. Yes, yes. So once you extend it, if you delete it, so once you store the data, if the table, whenever there is a build going on, the table will show you that error that in that EDT, the field B, you are extending a type which is of type A, and if that type A is missing, then it will throw an error. It will throw an error, and in that case, what you have to do, you have to simply go to field B and change the type.
Okay, okay, understood. And one more thing, this, the reduce work. So what I understood is like, we can create a fields and we can extend it whenever there is a necessity of having the same type of field,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes. Yeah, if you
So,
remember, if you remember
yeah,
the, just to give you, like for everyone also, if you see there's an like a kind of a real life example of the vehicle uh, uh, table which I was showing, right? If you
yeah,
remember, in all those table, you have so many fields like for type, code, then you have your make, model, maybe chassis number, engine number, all these field, right? What we
yeah,
generally
right.
have in vehicle field, that
Yeah,
field is not actually limited to your vehicle master data table. That can be used in all your transaction also, in all whenever there is a sale purchase of that vehicle, if you have a dealer transaction happening on that car, all these different things, right? Retail,
yeah.
if you have retail outlet for a table, you will have different database for that, but you will need the same type of fields in all those different data structure. So the reusability
Right.
lies here. I create my master data with 30 different columns and 30 different EDTs, and those 30 EDTs I can use it across the models which I am developing.
Okay, understood. It's a kind of, you have a resources folder where you typically create all these fields and you can use it wherever necessary. Kind of
Yeah,
that, right?
correct.
Perfect. And two more questions I have. So in the PPT, you mentioned that, we have to create it in an entity. What does that mean, entity here?
Creating an entity means simply object. So these objects which I said, so whenever I'm creating an data type, right,
Okay.
this enum, all these are we call as an entity.
Okay, okay. So for me, entity, when you say it, I understand it as a legal entity of a databases
No,
that we have.
not legal entity, not legal entity. So for development, we do not need to have that legal entity actually created in our system. So it's better if we have creating our objects is fine. So because creating legal entity will be like a separate task altogether, and I can simply go ahead for my development work. Actually, like what I feel, see, creating one new table, starting with that, creating new objects is fine. I can practice it for one day, but the main challenge lies when we have to work with the existing objects, and that is 90% of our work, because most of the times
Okay.
what happens, we are actually customizing the application, right? By customizing I mean
Right.
I already have my application. I need to build on top of something or extending or enhancing some of the capabilities. So in those
Right.
cases, I need to go to my existing table, see the cost table, sales table, which I'm showing, right? These are actual examples. And in those cases, I have to go and create new fields, doing some customization on the existing field to understand the logic and to find where you have to exactly add a field, write your logic. That is, I believe, is more critical, because whenever you are doing something from scratch, everything is in your hand, right? And you can do
Yeah.
as far as you need. So I'd say that is kind of a more easier than doing something on top of existing one. Okay. Any
Understood.
more questions?
One last question. So, in the master table, you will create the fields. I understood that. But what do you mean by, you will create fields and columns? What is column here?
Okay, fields are columns here only. Columns means like
Okay.
by like giving a reference from Excel. So in Excel you have columns and row, right?
Acha.
So for
Okay.
table,
Okay.
yeah, fields are my columns.
Understood. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, so we'll quickly go through few of the our review questions, and then we'll create a few EDTs and see. Let me share my screen. Okay, so everyone, you just can take a part and just answer me on one of these. Okay, so yeah, true or false?
True. True.
Yeah, it's true. So it's a primitive data type, we all know, and yes, properties, additional properties, we can say important, because additional properties is important. So that we can do. It is
True.
again true. Again, it depends
True.
actually, but you should use extended data type whenever possible. It is true. Yes. For any, as I said, explaining master data and transaction field, you should be using that. Yeah, benefits using, I think we all know, it should be reusability. Code is easier to read, definitely. Inherited properties and consistency, definitely. And this is easily compiled. It's not right actually. Everything is easily compiled and transferable, but yeah, it should be B, C, D, and D. So inherited properties is very important. And reusability, again, this is also important, but code is easier to read. Yeah, we know that code will be easier to read, but that is like a good to have feature. Okay. So let me go to the system actually and then show you. So this is the model which I created. I'll quickly see. Okay, first let me show you the EDT type which I was showing you, right? Okay. In object IoT, if I go to my data types, so I think you're all familiar with this now. If you go to data type, you see your extended data type, right? extended data type, I was showing you all the extended. So let us try to find something which was telling you, right? For a name, let's type name. See, we have a name, correct? And if you see the extended properties of name, see this properties are default. Let's look into this name. These are all like by default system fields, like alignment. As I was saying, alignment, all these things should be auto by default. This comes, and see, yeah, display height length. This is important also, which I was writing also in the PPT. Length should be 30. So here name, if you have created a name field, by default system has created name, and the length is 30. And if you see the extend, it doesn't extend anyone. So it's kind of a primitive data type. It is not extending anything. It's a string field which is a of 30 characters, and I keep my label also. By all other fields are like by default field. Yeah. And here length is 30, and here string size is 60. So that means whenever I'm storing the data, it should be the size 60, and when I'm displaying the data, display length is showed as a 30. Okay. So let's assume I have a name, and
Maitra, what
that
is the difference between string size and database string size? Because that's
just
showing as -2.
which one?
Database string size under just country region code.
Database string size. Okay. What is this property? Database. I think. Okay. Let me think. What is the thing? I'll just check and let you know, because in
Sure.
if it is actually coming from SQL, I think let me actually what is the terminal sequences database in SQL? How it is storing that one. Okay, I'll just check and let you know, because I just
Sure,
need
sure.
to check
Yeah.
this from.
And string
Yes,
size between display length?
yeah, string size is yeah, is explaining that. So let's assume I have a string size of 60 characters, and your name, when I'm storing the name, it is storing as a maybe maybe your name is of 50 characters. So I write the text and your name is of 50 characters. It is allowing till 60 characters, right? And so the 50 character name in the database size, it is fine. We can store the database, but the display length, whenever I'm seeing it in the front end, and the display height and the length, right? How, like in the form actually, whenever I'm seeing it in the front end, up to 30 characters I can see, or the length which I am allowed to see here is up to 30 characters. Okay, so see this name, this is my data structure. Like I can create a string size of maybe 1,000 characters, so I can allow 1,000 characters, right? But if you are adding this field to the UI, which is our ERP application, so the user need to go and type it, and he has to see the field, right? So that is what our display length and display height is being used. So if you see, you have two fields, display height and display length. So length is what I can mention here is 30, and the height is auto adjusted. So this is what the field. So that means whenever I create this field called name, I extend this with the EDT name, and then I add that field in my UI, which is my application. So there, that will be the display height and length will be coming out, and this is for my string size will be 60. Okay, so this is for a string field, normal string field. Let's assume the one important field which we on a day-to-day basis, which is our amount field, right? Which is explained, which is amount. See, if you see this amount field, see this is here again you have this height, length, all these things, display negative auto, because for here amount you can have your negative fields also. Again you have to give your names and everything, display, and scale is 6, and you have your, these are visibility public, all these are fine. And the other important part is yeah, these things, allow negative and auto separator, Yes, see, if you are allowing negative fields also, because for some application you can have an amount field but it doesn't allow you to have negatives. All this you can set here also. Again, as I was saying, these are very primitive data type, and if you go here and see, it will also not, in here it extends money. Again, the money is a like a data type which the system has created, but money is, we do not use this data. Again, these are actually created by system. We do not use money, we just simply use one use the amount, right? Again, by default, if you here allow negative as no, it will not allow. So again, here if you, the decimal separator auto, if you see the decimal separator, if you mark it as 2 or 3, it will say between 2 or 3, right? So these are the things you can simply control by creating one of the data type which you have. Now if I go and create a field, let's say you are here, we are showing this example, right? Remember this example, I go and
Maitra,
create
what is the difference between amount and amount 4 decimal in the previous screen?
uh,
In the, yeah, amount and amount 4 decimal. So one it is showing on the platform, one it is showing on the application. So
so here if you see, I think they have yeah, here decimal strength is showing us that is here number of
So is it
decimals,
out of box or it's kind of
all,
customized?
all these are out of box. See what happens. Okay, uh, see, this ERP is a huge application. Okay, so there are so many different models are there, and Microsoft, there are models which Microsoft also haven't developed. Okay, it works like that, that there are so many different partners working for Microsoft. Okay, if some small partner or someone small company which is actually working on Dynamics 365 ERP, but they have a, let's assume they have a customer base for one of the industries which is fleet management. Right now we always see, whenever we open it shows a fleet management, right? So that fleet management model or module rather was actually not developed by Microsoft. Someone else or third party company, they have built that fleet management module, and Microsoft understood, okay, if I have this module integrated into my ERP, that will be an added and advantage of selling the ERP. Correct? Is like simply you are acquiring something. You understand, right? I have an application and I can build on top of that application so many different small functionalities. The parent application finds, okay, these three functionalities are very useful. If I integrate that into my own ERP, I can sell it to more customers. Similarly, there was we talk about the warehousing, right? That warehousing module was some, there was, it was developed by someone, some else company. It's kind, there's a company called Blue Horseshoe. Okay, so that Blue Horseshoe, that is, there's a real company, I'm not making it up. So that company is actually developed that warehousing model, because that advanced warehousing, because Microsoft by default from the ERP we have inventory and warehouse model, but the advanced ERP warehouse management module, which is being used by different companies where they have been needing big logistic company. Let's say you have all the e-commerce and Flipkart, Amazon. You have the logistic company called Delivery, Blue Dart. You have seen the example of big warehouses, right? All those warehouses, they will need an advanced warehouse management system. If you go and buy Microsoft Dynamics 365 now, you will able to see that module, advanced warehouse management. You can do everything, but actually that module was not developed by Microsoft. Someone else has developed, and Microsoft simply have gone and integrated it. So whenever you are integrating something into the product, so you are bringing so many objects into your own product. So that is why whenever you see, there will be so many different objects created. Maybe something will not make much sense, but by default, as Microsoft allows so many integrations, so you can see all these things. See, I can show you some. See here, if you see, there is an EDT called amount card. This is also which you use, which is amount currency. Okay, this is used in the voucher transactions, which is a credit debit. But if you see here, they have created something called amount card credit, amount card debit, right? Amount card debit, and then again here they have amount card debit credit, which is a like a debit credit transaction. So all this, if you go and you will not be able to use, maybe you are not using all these fields, but maybe you are using only amount card. But again, as all those things Microsoft have developed, maybe they are also having their developers, right? They are also having going and create so many EDTs. So let's say we five are working and we do not have any control. You created 20 different EDTs. You do not know the reusability concept, and I also create 30 different EDTs. But at the same time, you have to go and deliver also, right? So then you do not go and maintain your consistency check reusability. You can simply go and publish all the changes. So in the system, if you go and you will see 50 different EDTs. Some EDTs you will see from the best practice concept, you will also understand, okay, see, these two are similar, why they are using it, or this doesn't make any sense, but you will able to see this. So this is very evident, and you will see so many different things, and all this whatever you are seeing, these are out of the box. It is nothing we have created, because this is like a clean slate which you are seeing. Okay, so yeah, so this is something for our amount. For enum field, I explained you, we have so many different types. I showed you sales type, all these things, right? Date, I was showing you. Let's say we have our trans date, I think, or is trans date. Yeah, see, trans date. We have a also trans date time, I was showing you, right? So this is a date time field, this is a date field. uh, Again, if you see, this is a field which is trans begin time. If you see the type of trans date time and trans begin time, these are all same, but see, trans begin time, maybe does it extend something? Let's see. Yeah, see, it doesn't extend anything. So this is then field which is a like EDT which is created by someone who has not extended, but it refers to trans date begin time, which is transaction begin time, right? So again, when we'll be developing something, we can go and create our own EDTs, but to understand when to create and when to extend is also very important, because whenever you go and create 1,000 different EDTs, it again, also there is a concept of like I would say duplicacy, or mean like maximizing of the number of objects. So that is not needed. So you should be, whenever you have a different set of type defined, then you should be creating your data type based on that, right? So again, there are so many different EDTs. Maybe 10% of them we are using on a day-to-day basis, because all the other things are created by someone for their own development purpose. And when you are creating in your model 50 different EDTs, maybe someone else, whoever is working in a different model, they will not be using your EDTs. As simple as that. It is just for our own reusability and usability, and like coding best practices we are creating this. So we conclude now, wrap up the session for today. If you have any questions, you can just go ahead and ask me.